Have you ever been so cold that you didn't know that you were going to make it? And have you ever seen through the fleeting snow the silhouette of a woman? Well, tonight on Spooky Readings, we are going to find out all about Yuki-Onna. Are you ready? Hello and welcome back to another week of Spooky Readings. My name is Bree and tonight we are delving back into Lafcadio Hearn's Kwaidan, and we will be touching on Yuki-Onna and also another one of my favorites as well. Now today I am sporting a yukata, so a summer kimono. This one I bought when I was living in Japan over 15 years ago. I did put it on hastily, so it doesn't look great. But I actually bought it from Uniqlo, which of course in English is Uniqlo. So just from a regular department store, I thought, you wear them during summer because they're the summer kimono, and it's very, very hot in summer. So I wanted a cheap one that I didn't mind ruining, but it's this lovely light purple, very girly. Of course, I was only 18 when I bought this, so if you're like, oh, that's very girly for someone your age, that is why, because I have kept it for a decade and a half. But yes, I hope you're excited about tonight's stories because I am so excited to delve back into Hearn's stories about Japanese folklore. Okay, all right. You ready? Grab yourself a hot beverage and get ready for Yuki-Onna. In a village of Musashi province, there lived two woodcutters, Mosaku and Minokichi. At the time of which I am speaking, Mosaku was an old man, and Minokichi, his apprentice, was a lad of 18 years. Every day they went together to a forest situated about 5 miles from their village. On the way to that forest there was a wide river to cross, and there is a ferry boat. Several times a bridge was built where the ferry is, but the bridge was each time carried away by a flood. No common bridge can resist the current there where the river rises. Mosaku and Minokichi were on their way home one very cold evening when a great snowstorm overtook them. They reached the ferry and they found that the boatman had gone away, leaving his boat on the other side of the river. It was no day for swimming, and the woodcutters took shelter in the ferryman's hut, thinking themselves lucky to find any shelter at all. There was no brazier in the hut, nor any place in which to make a fire. It was only a 2-mat hut, that is to say, with a floor surface of about 6 feet square, with a single door but no window. Mosaku and Minokichi fastened the door and lay down to rest, with their straw raincoats over them. At first they did not feel very cold, and they thought that the storm would soon be over. The old man almost immediately fell asleep, but the boy, Minokichi, lay awake a long time listening for the awful wind and the continual slashing of the snow against the door. The river was roaring and the hut swayed and creaked like a junk at sea. It was a terrible storm, and the air was every moment becoming colder, and Minokichi shivered under his raincoat. But at last, in spite of the cold, he too fell asleep. He was awakened by a showering of snow in his face. The door of the hut had been forced open, and by the snowlight, Yuki-Akari, he saw a woman in the room, a woman all in white. She was bending above Mosaku and blowing her breath upon him, and her breath was like a bright white smoke. Almost in the same moment, she turned to Minokichi and stooped over him. He tried to cry out, but found that he could not utter any sound. The white woman bent down over him, lower and lower, until her face almost touched him, and he saw that she was very beautiful, though her eyes made him afraid. For a little time she continued to look at him. Then she smiled, and she whispered, "I intended to treat you like the other man, but I cannot help feeling some pity for you, because you are so young. You are a pretty boy, Minokichi, and I will not hurt you now. But if you ever tell anybody, even your own mother, about what you have seen this night, I shall know it, and then I will kill you. Remember what I say." With these words, she turned from him, passed through the doorway. Then he found himself able to move, and he sprang up and looked out. But the woman was nowhere to be seen, and the snow was driving furiously into the hut. Minokichi closed the door and secured it by fixing several billets of wood against it. He wondered if the wind had blown it open. He thought that he might have been only dreaming, and might have mistaken the gleam of the snowlight in the doorway for the figure of a white woman. But he could not be sure. He called to Mosaku, and was frightened because the old man did not answer. He put out his hand in the dark and touched Mosaku's face, and found that it was ice. Mosaku was stark and dead. By dawn the storm was over, and when the ferryman returned to his station a little after sunrise, he found Minokichi lying senseless beside the frozen body of Mosaku. Minokichi was promptly cared for and soon came to himself, but he remained a long time ill from the effects of the cold of that terrible night. He had been greatly frightened also by the old man's death, but he said nothing about the vision of the woman in white. As soon as he got well again, he returned to his calling, going alone every morning to the forest and coming back at nightfall with his bundles of wood, which his mother helped him to sell. One evening, in the winter of the following year, as he was on his way home, he overtook a girl who happened to be travelling by the same road. She was a tall, slim girl, very good-looking, and she answered Minokichi's greeting in a voice as pleasant to the ear as the voice of a songbird. Then he walked beside her, and they began to talk. The girl said that her name was Yuki. This name, signifying snow, is not uncommon. On the subject of Japanese female names, see my paper in the volume entitled Shadowings. That's a footnote. The girl said that her name was Oyuki, that she had lately lost both of her parents, and that she was going to Yedo, where she happened to have some poor relations who might help her find a situation as a servant. Minokichi soon felt charmed by this strange girl, and the more that he looked at her, the handsomer she appeared to be. He asked her whether she was yet betrothed, and she answered laughingly that she was free. Then, in her turn, she asked Minokichi whether he was married or pledged to marry, and he told her that, although he had only a widowed mother to support, the question of an honourable daughter-in-law had not yet been considered, as he was very young. After these confidences, they walked on for a long while without speaking. But as the proverb declares, "Ki ga areba, me no kuchi hodo ni mono wo in." Mono wo in. When the wish is there, the eyes can say as much as the mouth. By the time they reached the village, they had become very much pleased with each other, and then Minokichi asked Oyuki to rest a while at his house. After some shy hesitation, she went there with him, and his mother made her welcome. and prepared a warm meal for her. O Yuki behaved so nicely that Minokichi's mother took a sudden fancy to her and persuaded her to delay her journey to Yedo. And the natural end of the matter was that Yuki never went to Yedo at all. She remained in the house as an honorable daughter-in-law. O Yuki proved a very good daughter-in-law. When Minokichi's mother came to die some 5 years later, her last words were words of affection and praise for the wife of her son. And O Yuki bore Minokichi 10 children, boys and girls, handsome children, all of them, and very fair of skin. The country folk thought O Yuki a wonderful person, by nature different from themselves. Most of the peasant women age early, but O Yuki, even after having become the mother of 10 children, looked as young and fresh as on the day when she had first come to the village. One night after the children had gone to sleep, O Yuki was sewing by the light of a paper lamp, and Minokichi, watching her, said, "To see you sewing there with the light on your face makes me think of a strange thing that happened when I was a lad of 18, when I then saw somebody as beautiful and white as you are now indeed. She was very like you." Without lifting her eyes from her work, O Yuki responded, "Tell me about her. Where did you see her?" Then Minokichi told her about the terrible night in the ferryman's hut, and about the white woman that had stooped above him smiling and whispering, and about the silent death of old Masaku, and he said, "Asleep or awake, that was the only time that I saw a being as beautiful as you. Of course, she was not a human being, and I was afraid of her, very much afraid, but she was so white. Indeed, I have never been sure whether it was a dream that I saw or the woman of the snow." O Yuki flung down her sewing and arose and bowed above Minokichi where he sat and shrieked in his face, "It was I, Yuki it was. And I told you then that I would kill you if you ever said one word about it. But for those children asleep there, I would kill you this moment. And now you had better take very, very good care of them. For if ever they have reason to complain of you, I will treat you as you deserve." Even as she screamed, her voice became thin, like a crying of wind. Then she melted into a bright white mist that spired to the roof beams and shuddered away through the smoke hole. Never again was she seen. Did you guys like that one? That one's pretty awesome, isn't it? I think that was one of the more famous ones from this collection. This next story is called Rokuro-Kubi. Nearly 500 years ago, there was a samurai named Isogai Heidazaemon Taketsura in the service of Lord Kikuji of Kyushu. This Isogai had inherited from many warlike ancestors a natural aptitude for military exercises and extraordinary strength. While yet a boy, he had surpassed his teachers in the art of swordsmanship, in archery, and in the use of the spear, and had displayed all the capacities of a daring and skillful soldier. Afterwards, in the time of the Eikyo War, so Eikyo lasted from 1429 to 1441, footnote, he so distinguished himself that high honours were bestowed upon him, But when the house of Kikuji came to ruin, Isogai found himself without a master. He might then easily have obtained service under another daimyo, but as he had never sought distinction for his own sake alone, and as his heart remained true to his former lord, he preferred to give up the world. So he cut off his hair and became a traveling priest, taking the Buddhist name of Kwairyo, but always under the kromo of the priest, that is the upper robe of a Buddhist priest. Kwairyo kept warm within him the heart of the samurai. As in other years he had laughed at perils, so now he scorned danger, and in all weathers and all seasons he journeyed to preach the good law in places where no other priest would have dared to go. For that age was an age of violence and disorder, and upon the highways there was no security for the solitary traveller, even if he happened to be a priest. In the course of his first long journey, Kwairyo had occasion to visit the province of Kai. One evening, as he was travelling through the mountains of that province, darkness overtook him in a very loathsome district, leagues away from any village. So he resigned himself to pass the night under the stars, and having found a suitable grassy spot by the roadside, he lay down there and prepared to sleep. He had always welcomed discomfort, and even a bare rock was for him a good bed, when nothing better could be found, and the root of a pine tree an excellent pillow. His body was iron, and he never troubled himself about dews or rain or frost or snow. Scarcely he had lain down when a man came along the road, carrying an axe and a great bundle of chopped wood. This woodcutter halted on seeing Kwairyo lying down, and, after a moment of silent observation, said to him in a tone of great surprise, "What kind of man can you be, good sir, that you dare to lie down alone in such a place as this? There are haunters about here, many of them. Are you not afraid of hairy things?" Hairy things. "My friend," cheerfully answered Kwairyo, "I am only a wandering priest, a cloud and water guest, as folks call it. Unsui no ryokaku. And I am not in the least afraid of hairy things. If you mean goblin foxes or goblin badgers or any creatures of that kind. As for lonesome places, I like them. They are suitable for meditation. I am accustomed to sleeping in the open air, and I have learned never to be anxious about my life." "You must be indeed a brave man, Sir Priest," the peasant responded, "to lie down there. This place has a bad name, a very bad name, but as the proverb has it, kunshi aya yuki ni chika yorazu." I love Japanese proverbs, but I'm not great at reading Japanese out loud. Kunshi aya yuki ni chika yorazu. The superior man does not needlessly expose himself to peril. And I must assure you, sir, that it is very dangerous to sleep here. Therefore, although my house is only a wretched thatched hut, let me beg of you to come home with me at once in a way of food. I have nothing to offer you, but there is a roof at least. In the way of food, I have nothing to offer you, but there is a roof at least, and you can sleep under it without risk." He spoke earnestly, and Kwairyo, liking the kindly tone of the man, accepted his modest offer. The woodcutter guided him along a narrow path leading up from the main road through mountain forest. It was a rough and dangerous path, sometimes skirting precipices. Sometimes offering nothing but a network of slippery roots for the foot to rest upon, sometimes winding over or between masses of jagged rock. But at last Kwaidan found himself upon a cleared space at the top of a hill with a full moon shining overhead, and he saw before him a small thatched cottage, cheerfully lighted from within. The woodcutter led him to a shed at the back of the house, whither water had been conducted through bamboo pipes from some neighbouring stream, and the two men washed their feet. Beyond the shed was a vegetable garden and a grove of cedars and bamboos, and beyond the trees appeared the glimmer of a cascade pouring from some loftier height and swaying in the moonshine like a long white robe. As Kwaidan entered the cottage with his guide, he perceived 4 persons, men and women, warming their hands at a little fire kindled in the raw of the principal apartment. So the raw is a sort of little fireplace contrived in the floor of a room, is thus described. The raw is usually a square shallow cavity lined with metal and half filled with ashes in which charcoal is lighted. That's the footnote. They bowed low to the priest and greeted him in the most respectful manner. Kwaidan wondered that persons so poor and dwelling in such solitude should be aware of the polite forms of greeting. These are good people, he thought to himself, and they must have been taught by someone well acquainted with the rules of propriety. Then, turning to his host, the aruji, or housemaster, as the other called him, Kwaidan said, "From the kindness of your speech and from the very polite welcome given me by your household, I imagine that you have not always been a woodcutter. Perhaps you formerly belonged to one of the upper classes?" Smiling, the woodcutter answered, "Sir, you are not mistaken. Though now living as you find me, I was once a person of some distinction. My story is the story of a ruined life, ruined by my own fault. I used to be in the service of a daimyo, and my rank in that service was not inconsiderable, but I loved women and wine too well, and under the influence of passion, I acted wickedly. My selfishness brought about the ruin of our house and caused the death of many persons. Retribution followed me, and I long remained a fugitive in the land. Now I often pray that I may be able to make some atonement for the evil which I did, and to re-establish the ancestral home, but I fear that I shall never find any way of so doing. Nevertheless, I try to overcome the karma of my errors by sincere repentance and by helping, as far as I can, those who are unfortunate." Kwaidan was pleased by this announcement of good resolve, and he said to the aruji, "My friend, I have had occasion to observe that men prone to folly in their youth may in after years become very earnest in right living. In the Holy Sutras, it is written that those strongest in wrongdoing can become by power of good resolve the strongest in right doing. I do not doubt that you have a good heart, and I hope that better fortune will come to you. Tonight I shall recite the sutras for your sake and pray that you may obtain the force to overcome the karma of any past errors." With these assurances, Kwaidan bade the aruji a good night, and his host showed him to a very small side room where a bed had been made ready. Then all went to sleep except the priest, who began to read the sutras by the light of a paper lantern. Until a late hour he continued to read and pray. Then he opened a window in his little sleeping room to take a last look at the landscape before lying down. The night was beautiful. There was no cloud in the sky, there was no wind, and the strong moonlight threw down sharp black shadows of foliage and glittered on the dews of the garden. Shrillings of crickets and bell insects made a musical tumult. And the sound of the neighbouring cascade deepened with the night. Kwaidan felt thirsty as he listened to the noise of the water, and remembering the bamboo aqueduct at the rear of the house, thought that he could go there and get a drink without disturbing the sleeping household. Very gently he pushed apart the sliding screens that separated his room from the main apartment, and what he saw by the light of the lantern, 5 recumbent bodies without heads. What? For one instant, he stood bewildered, imagining a crime. But in another moment, he perceived that there was no blood, and that the headless necks did not look as if they had been cut. Then he thought to himself, either this is an illusion made by goblins, or I have been lured into the dwelling of a Rokuro-Kubi. In the book Soshinki, it is written that if one finds the body of a Rokuro-Kubi without his head and remove the body to another place, the head will never be able to join itself again to the neck. And the book further says that when the head comes back and finds that its body has been moved, it will strike itself upon the floor 3 times, bounding like a bull, and will pant as in great fear and presently die. Now, if these be Rokuro-Kubi, they may mean no good, and I shall be justified in following the instructions of the book. He seized the body of the Aruji by the feet, pulled it to the window and pushed it out. Then he went to the back door, which he found barred, and he surmised that the heads had made their exit through the smoke hole in the roof, which had been left open. Gently unbarring the door, he made his way to the garden and proceeded with all possible caution to the grove beyond it. He heard voices talking in the grove, and he went in the direction of the voices, stealing from shadow to shadow until he reached a good hiding place. Then, from behind a trunk, he caught sight of the heads, all 5 of them flitting about and chatting as they flitted. They were eating worms and insects, which they found on the ground amongst the trees. Presently the head of the Aruji stopped eating and said, "Ah, that travelling priest who came tonight, how fat all his body is. When we shall have eaten him, our bellies will be well filled. I was foolish to talk to him as I did. It only set him to reciting the sutras on behalf of my soul. To go near him while he is reciting would be difficult, and we cannot touch him so long as he is praying. But as it is now nearly morning, perhaps he has gone to sleep. Someone of you go to the house and see what the fellow is doing." Another head, the head of a young woman, immediately rose up and flitted to the house lightly as a bat. After a few minutes, it came back and cried out huskily in a tone of great alarm, That travelling priest is not in the house, he is gone. But that is not the worst of the matter. He has taken the body of our Aruji, and I do not know where he has put it. At this announcement, the head of the Aruji, distinctly visible in the moonlight, assumed a frightful aspect. Its eyes opened monstrously. Monstrously. Yeah, got it. Its hair stood up bristling and its teeth gnashed. Then a cry burst from its lips, and weeping tears of rage, it exclaimed, "Since my body has been moved to rejoin, it is not possible, then I must die, and all through the work of that priest. Before I die, I will get at that priest. I will tear him. I will devour him. And there he is behind that tree, hiding behind that tree. See him, the fat coward." In the same moment, the head of the Yaruji, followed by the other four heads, sprang at Kwairo, but the strong priest had already armed himself by plucking up a young tree, and with that tree he struck the heads as they came, knocking them from him with tremendous blows. 4 of them fled away, but the head of the Yaruji, though battered again and again, desperately continued to bound at the priest, and at last caught him by the left sleeve of his robe. Kwairo, however, as quickly gripped the head by its top knot and repeatedly struck it. It did not release its hold, but it uttered a long moan and therefore ceased to struggle. It was dead, but its teeth still held the sleeve. And for all its great strength, Kwairo could not force open the jaws. With the head still hanging to his sleeve, he went back to the house, and there caught sight of the other 4 Rokuro-Kubi squatting together with their bruised and bleeding heads reunited to their bodies. But when they perceived him at the back door, all screamed, "The priest! The priest!" and fled through the other doorway out into the woods. Eastward, the sky was brightening. Day was about to dawn, and Kwaidan knew that the power of the goblins was limited to the hours of darkness. He looked at the head clinging to his sleeve, its face all fouled with blood and foam and clay, and he laughed aloud as he thought to himself, "What a miyage!" So, miyage is omiyage, which is souvenir, but in Japan, whenever you travel somewhere, you often get omiyage for everyone back home. And omiyage is usually something that is locally produced, so a local gift. So, for example, if I went to Kamakura, and there were these bird-shaped biscuits or castella with a bird on them, and that was from that region, I think. But yeah, you can get all kinds of different omiyage. But he's joking. He's like, "What a miyage! The head of a goblin." After which he gathered together his few belongings and leisurely descended the mountain to continue his journey. Right on he journeyed until he came to Suwa in Shinano. And onto the main street of Suwa he sullenly strode with the head dangling at his elbow. Then women fainted and children screamed and ran away. And there was a great crowding and clamouring until the torite, as the police of those days were called, seized the priest and took him to jail, for they supposed the head to be the head of a murdered man who, in the moment of being killed, had caught the murderer's sleeve in his teeth. As for Kwaidan, he only smiled and said nothing when they questioned him. So after having passed a night in prison, he was brought before the magistrates of the district. Then he was ordered to explain how he, a priest, had been found with the head of a man fastened to his sleeve, and why he had dared thus shamelessly to parade his crime in the sight of the people. Kwaidan laughed long and loudly at these questions, and then he said, "Sirs, I did not fasten the head to my sleeve. It fastened itself there much against my will, and I have not committed any crime, for this is not the head of a man. This is the head of a goblin, and if I caused the death of a goblin, I did not do so by any shedding of blood, but simply by taking the precautions necessary to assure my own safety." And he proceeded to relate the whole of the adventure, bursting into another hearty laugh as he told of his encounter with the 5 heads. But the magistrates did not laugh. Nope. They judged him to be a hardened criminal and his story an insult to their intelligence. Therefore, without further questioning, they decided to order his immediate execution, all of them except one, a very old man. This aged officer made no remark during the trial, but after having heard the opinion of his colleagues, he rose up and said, "Let us first examine the head carefully, for this, I think, has not yet been done. If the priest has spoken truth, the head itself should bear witness for him. Bring the head here." So the head, still holding in its teeth the koromo that had been stripped from Kwaidan's shoulders, was put before the judges. The old man turned it round and round, carefully examined it, and discovered, on the nape of its neck, several strange red characters. He called the attention of his colleagues to these, and also bade them to observe that the edges of the neck nowhere presented the appearance of having been cut by any weapon. On the contrary, the line of severance was smooth as the line at which a falling leaf detaches itself from the stem. Then said the elder, "I am quite sure that the priest told us nothing but the truth. This is the head of a Rokuro-Kubi. In the book Nanhoi Butsushi, it is written that certain red characters can always be found upon the nape of the neck of a real Rokuro-Kubi. There are the characters. You can see for yourselves that they have not been painted. Moreover, it is well known that such goblins have been dwelling in the mountains of the province of Kai for a very long time. But you, sir," he exclaimed, turning to Kwaidan, "what sort of sturdy priest may you be? Certainly you have given proof of a courage that few priests possess, and you have the air of a soldier rather than of a priest. Perhaps you once belonged to the samurai class?" "You have guessed rightly, sir," Kwaidan responded. "Before becoming a priest, I long followed the profession of arms, and in those days I never feared man or devil. My name then was Isogai Hedazayamon Taketsura of Kyushu. There may be some among you who remember it." At the utterance of that name, a murmur of admiration filled the courtroom, for there were many present who remembered it, and Kwaidan immediately found himself among friends instead of judges, friends anxious to prove their admiration by fraternal kindness. With honour they escorted him to the residence of the daimyo, who welcomed him and feasted him and made him a handsome present before allowing him to depart. When Kwaidan left Suwa, he was as happy as any priest is permitted to be in this transitory world. As for the head, he took it with him. Jocosely, that's a new word. I'll put it down below. Insisting that he intended it for a miyage. And now it only remains to tell what became of the head. A day or two after leaving Suwa, Kwairyo met with a robber who stopped him in a lonesome place and bade him strip. Kwairyo at once removed his koromo and offered it to the robber, who then first perceived what was hanging to the sleeve. Though brave, the highwayman was startled. He dropped the garment and sprang back, then cried out, "You! What kind of priest are you? Why, you are worse man than I am. It is true that I have killed people, but I've never walked about with anyone's head fastened to my sleeve. Well, Sir Priest, I suppose we are of the same calling, and I must say that I admire you. Now, that head would be of use to me. I could frighten people with it. Will you sell it? You can have my robe in exchange for your koromo, and I will give you 5 ryo for the head." Kwairyo answered, "I shall let you have the head and the robe if you insist, but I must tell you that this is not a head that this is not the head of a man, it is a goblin's head. So, if you buy it and have any trouble in consequence, please remember that you were not deceived by me." "What a nice priest you are," proclaimed the robber. "You kill men and jest about it, but I am really in earnest. Here is my robe, and here is the money, and let me have the head. What is the use of joking?" "Take the thing," said Kwairyo. "I was not joking. The only joke, if there be any joke at all, is that you are fool enough to pay good money for a goblin's head." And Kwairyo, loudly laughing, went upon his way. Thus the robber got the head and the koromo, and for some time he played goblin priest upon the highways, but reaching the neighbourhood of Suwa, he there learned the real history of the head, and he then became afraid that the spirit of the Rokuro-Kubi might give him trouble. So he made up his mind to take back the head to the place from which it had come and to bury it with its body. He found his way to the lonely cottage in the mountains of Kai, but no one was there, and he could not discover the body. Therefore he buried the head by itself in the grove behind the cottage, and he had a tombstone set up over the grave. And he caused a segaki service to be performed on behalf of the spirit of the Rokuro-Kubi, and that tombstone, known as the tombstone of the Rokuro-Kubi, may be seen, at least so the Japanese storyteller declares, even unto this day. And that, my dear friends, is Rokuro-Kubi. I think the reason why I liked this was that this goblin type was a bit different than what we are taught in the West. So I hope you have really enjoyed tonight's stories. Sorry, I'm trying to fit myself into the frame. That's why I'm hunched over so much this episode. I just need to lift the camera up a bit, I think. Yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. Another thing that I forgot to mention in last week's episode is the appearance of monks, Buddhist monks, and Buddhism in general when it comes to these folklore tales. Sorry, you're probably going to hear me holding the mic a bit. Yeah, there are so many folklore tales that we won't get around to this season of spooky readings that really, they're just all about these Buddhist monks. And I think Buddhism is so heavily rooted in Japanese folklore. So you'll always have monks and sutras, and often you'll have like these hermit monks who have transcended to the point that they've gained supernatural powers and they're just monks flying around. And I remember when I was really new to reading Japanese folklore, I got really, really confused because I didn't quite understand the Buddhism aspect of it. And so whenever they said monks, I like kind of pictured European Benedictine monks flying around. Not quite the same. But yeah, I didn't know anything about Buddhism, so I didn't really know about like transcending to having powers, being able to fly and stuff. Yeah. But that's one of my favorite. And talking about monks, next week on Spooky Readings, we have one of the most famous tales from this book. We have Mimi no Nashi Hoichi, or Mimi Nashi Hoichi, which is also the cover of this version, of this publication of Kwaidan. Yeah, he is a monk as well, and we're going to find out more about him next week. So stay tuned and stay safe and stay spooky. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for coming on this ride with me, guys. I really need to go to bed. My voice is getting croaky now. All right, take care. See you next week. Bye.